Hello, friends. Can you hear me? Yeah? Is that okay? Good. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Jay Bernard. Thank you so much for inviting me to Swimmers. This is my first time here. And I'm going to kind of sort of do two things, I suppose. The first thing I'm going to do is take you back to the Middle Ages. And then the second thing I'm going to do is take you to the 1980s. Two very similar time periods, as you can imagine. Has anyone heard of the Tale of Sir Morian? No, exactly. That's great. I love it. My job here is very clear. So I started writing about Morian, who is a Black Knight of the Round Table, kind of, and he was born in the Moorish lands, and then he travels back to Camelot to find his dad, Sir Aglovale. And it's a really long, twisted, complicated story. You know, they fight the King of Ireland and all that. But I thought it was such an interesting story to have this literally black character at the centre of this, you know, otherwise quite standard tale. So I wrote a prequel to that because, you know, I'm trying to like line up the movie deals and stuff. So I thought I'd write the prequel first, and then I might do part 6, and then maybe part 2, and, you know, kind of bounce around like that. So yeah. A silver wind came passing in the distant land where books begin, where maids and men and hermits sing, in the land before the story. Blue grows the darkness, oh, there beneath the daylight, oh. A knight named Morian had sworn he'd find the reason he was born. His dad had left his mum forlorn, in the land before the story, oh. Some things we know but can't say why. The dark is what light travels by. A blind man's finger is his eye. In the land before the story. O Aglovale of Camelot, here comes the son that you forgot. His armour's black, his temper's hot. In the land before the story. And history is on the wing. The past and present form a ring. And time is but a fractal thing. In the land before the story. Story. Story, blue grows the darkness, oh, there among the daylight, oh. While Morian's travelling through this land, he comes across a woman who has committed a grave sin and is now being punished. The hog-tied girl is crying for her mother, stripped and shaved down with a knife, hanging from a pole between two men. Her throat is closing and her back is cramping. Morian leaves and follows the crowd and comes to see the village, every family, some holy men from another land follow the hog-tied girl crying for God and her mother. He buys a relic, a cuticle from the mother of God. The trees fall silent, the leaves begin to bend around the bulk of something bending down to breathe and smell and see the hog-tied girl writhing like an errant sea. The something turns and squats above the girl crying for God and her mother. Turns and squats and sits on her head and shifts and withdraws and relaxes and re-screws and presses down. Pink sphincter splits like a sheath and pulls her in. The something squats and sucks, receives to the chin, to the neck, the shoulders, then up, gets good and steady, then again, then slop and grind, muffle and screams, then slop. The something unfocuses its eyes. The friction, the huffing, the pleasure for the something is 2 hours before finally it sighs, and out falls the girl, slick and silent and heavy and wet as if she drowned. She is a child's finger, yellow-brown to the knuckle of her neck. The stink begins. Across the way, 3 boys are waiting by an oblong grave. With their faces wrapped, they drag the girl and throw her in. Sticks and kindling, a fire begins. The something returns to the trees, the ash, the oak, the dark that cleaves them, ash and oak. Blue grows the darkness, oh, there beneath the daylight, oh. At one point, Morion is having the same dream as his father, Sir Aglavor. I dreamt that I woke in the wilderness, wanted for something and walked in the wilderness. Black was the light, saw folks made of green, and the rain was falling backwards. The land, it was silent, a place that was placed inside another and slowly replaced by a mist that grew thicker, and as it uncurled, unrolled a strong tower in the black of the field. I found myself walking on wood made from oak that had never been cut or fashioned to stairs. The spiral I stepped on was still that bold oak. I walked up its belly and into its throat. The stairs of that throat in that belly of oak was 60 in number of good red gold, like hands to my feet, each dipped as I stepped. Each stair was a palm, catching at flesh. I stepped onto one and it fast fell away. Another one dropped, and another one dropped. The stairs all fell, I fell away too. The stairs of that throat, that belly of oak. I felt myself twin to the darkness below. Snakes without fathers, both sexes entwined, as fierce as the bears that were baited by men. The sound of their agony, symbol enough, their blood-soaked fur, their mouths torn off. I found myself screaming at the foot of the bed. I found myself screaming at the foot of the bed. Black was the light, and black was the field, and the rain was falling backwards. The second half of this, I've been thinking a lot about the New Cross Fire. I don't know if everyone here knows what the New Cross Fire was or when it happened. No? Yeah, no? So for those of you who do know, the New Cross Fire took place, for those of you who don't know, the New Cross Fire took place in 1981. And basically 13 kids died. It was a party that was being held by a sort of West Indian family, and a lot of the guests there would have been West Indian as well. And this took place just down the road in 1981, and it was the catalyst for a lot of major political shifts in this country. So we've all heard of the Brixton riots, right? That was because of the New Cross Fire in 1981. They were protesting because of that. And these 13 kids died, and the Queen and Margaret Thatcher and the press were completely silent about it, and nobody had anything to say. And the reason it was so intense was because a lot of parties and things had been firebombed around that time. Like, there's a whole list of things that had happened, and so it was outrageous, really, that there was nothing said. And of course, as I was writing all of this, I was in an archive called the George Padmore Institute. As I was writing all this, Grenfell happened, which was totally intense and insane and crazy, and it was, what was worse about it was that it was the same cycle. So it was like history repeating itself. So these poems I dedicate to, the people, the victims of the New Cross Fire, but also I hope to victims of Grenfell as well. Remember, we were brought here from the clear waters of our dreams, that we might be counted, named, and numbered, that we might be forgotten. That we were made visible, that we might be looked on with contempt. That they gave us their first and last names, that we might be called dogs, and to their minds made flesh, that it might be stripped from our bones. Our children kept hungry, that they might cry in their sleep, open their timeless mouths around the dark, and swallow us as we gaze on them, never to be full. My voice, it was so weak, so sickened, so grieved. My voice, it was so weak and it broke in the heat. So sickened, so sad, my voice, it was broke. So low was the hope that it sickened, I choked. It closed in my throat. My voice, it was weak, so sickened, so grieved. My voice became glass breaking in heat. I called and no one seemed to call with me, and no one seemed to know or see what I had seen. I was so sickened and so grieved. And I said to the child I knew harboured in the fire, Yvonne, jump, Paul, jump. And I said to my God I knew harboured in the fire, jump, Yvonne, jump, Paul, jump. And I said and I called, jump, Yvonne, jump, Paul, jump. My voice was so weak, Paul, jump, so sickened and so grieved. He takes your head and places it in a plastic bag. The windows are cups of water filled with winter. He parts the bag away from his body and peers in, searching for a gaze to meet. The cold, it tries to coax you out and thirsts at your skull. He doesn't see you standing there, he doesn't hear you speak. An officer circles the front yard, leaning back to see the smoke, or is it steam? Is it fire or water that can bring someone back? In lie that which is heavy in his hand, and that which watches from the corner of the room. This house is a gas lamp. Soot lines its glass, white gut, flameless and blown. He closes the bag and tilts his head back. His eyes are two offerings, 2 pennies and a fount. From below, you glimpse his warm, white throat. And from the corner, his body bending towards yours. I stop work in the archive and go downstairs for a meeting. I make tea, shake hobnobs onto a plate, mind like a cigarette trailing back upstairs, back to my desk, tethered to 81. We need to discuss whether we open the door to our neighbour when all he ever wants is milk and tobacco. He lives with his dad across the road and can be seen most days walking in circles around the estate. He comes to us for tea, for tobacco, for Rizla, and he asks for the earth. Tobacco, seeds and leaves and bits of tree and milk that is given and made for the young. He asks for a fingerful of damp baccy that might be soil with vines in mind, planted in white paper. Smoke curls like bindweed in his lungs, Rizla like white petals. Our fridge is full of Tupperware, filled with rotting food. Mince, with its mossy grey hair standing up on end. Beignet mix with green and white ackee. Ham hock and beetroot overcome by clouds. Clotted cream like a cracked cylinder of mud. From my desk, I often see him coming, his face slack beneath a grubby cap, his neck curiously rigid, his lopsided Reebok classics, his foot straining at the seams like they're stuffed with chicken breasts. He asks for the earth. He never says thanks. He never seems aware of what is being traded, the milk as measure, the milk as sign. If he comes again asking, we are to give him this much. Our fingers pinch the air, and this much. We part our hands about the height of a heart. I came here when I was 6. Since 1966, I was a little cricket fan in short trousers, and I loved my grandmother, and she was my mother, and she raised me with my 3 sisters who treated me very well indeed because I was the smallest and the last to come to England. And when I arrived, I knew something had happened to me. I knew that what I saw in the mirror had been recontoured and differently arranged. And when I looked at myself in my new tie and shoes, I saw something like a net that catches death. I thought, here I am. 6 years old, and already I feel like my life is finished. What is left? I was the child of 2 strangers, my mother and father who bathed me, 2 ghosts rubbing soap on my shoulders, 2 dead people in their house clothes, telling me to wash my neck. And I thought, here I am, 6 years old, and I feel like I have to hold on and say, I don't want to die in this country. Let me die with my grandmother. I want to be rotted by the sun, and I want her shadow to fall along my body, and I want to be shaded by her grief. And I want the dogs in the yard to scratch their heads indifferent. I want to be eaten by worms and become an ackee tree. Lord, I said, and I said it in such a whisper I could have put the ground to sleep. Don't let me die in England, I said to the pavement, to the shining black rain upon it, and never tell my grandmother why I never called to say that I thought of her daily, that I suffered with gratitude all that she had freely given. Many nights before this one, I wondered what she thought of that, what she thought of the littlest grandchild who couldn't say that many nights before this one, I tried to forget that I loved her. Turn the pain of her remembrance to the bitter lie that she could not have loved one such as me. And the proof was in the distance. The officer said, "Oh, it's very common for culprits to go missing." And I said, my son isn't a culprit, and how dare he imply it? And one of the officers stood up at the window and looked out. And he didn't want to look us full in the eye. He made it clear. He made it clear from the moment he set foot in the house, the moment he set foot, what he thought of us. And when they came back a few days later, I think the Tuesday, they said, what were you wearing on the night of the fire? And I said, probably your new trousers. And he said, were you wearing a yellow shirt? I said, yes. Brown shoes? I said, yes. And he took the items from a plastic bag. He said, these are your things. And he says, does it look like it? And I says, does it look like it belongs to you? And I said, yes. And he says, do you recognize this key? I said, why don't we try it? And we struggled and it fit. And he said, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. So I said, what are you sorry for? I want to see my son. Stammer, stammer. They said, oh, we don't think it's a good idea. I said, I am your father. I said, I am your father. I am your father and I want to see you. And they led us down to a room. And there on the table, there you were. No face, nothing to speak of. And I said, this is the body where you found the clothes. And they nodded. And I said, it must be you. This must be my son. You came, Dad. I had been lying there all night and I couldn't move. I opened my eyes and I was in the house and everything was black, Dad. I had been at the party a few hours. I didn't know anything about what had happened, Dad. And I felt someone touch me, but I was stiff, Dad. I'd never been so stiff before and I tried to say, it's me, but they were looking at me so strangely, Dad. Like he couldn't stand to look at me. Police always look at me like that. And he turned me over and he took the shirt from under me and they wrapped me in a blanket and they drove me here. And I was lying there waiting for you, Dad. Across the table there were bodies, Dad. Twisted, Dad, no heads, like screaming branches of a tree, Dad. Loads of them, I swear, and I heard them say it. And they were saying, and then you came, Dad, and I was calling out to you. And I know you heard me because here you are, Dad. Come back and don't bury me. I can't stand it. I can barely stand it when the lights go off and I'm here and I spend the whole night listening for you, Dad. I want to crawl between Mum and you, in your bed, in your sheets, Dad. That's the only kind of burying I want. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was incredible. I think that's, see, I'm biased, but that's one of the best set of readings I think I've heard in a long time. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you to Lucy, Hannah, Jay, and Rowan. And I should say quickly that Lucy's work is going to be featured in the next Swimmers. Hannah is going to be published next year. Her collection's coming out with Faber. You'll be able to read that in book form then. Rowan's book is available in bookstores. And Jay has some pamphlets with them, which are for sale. And also, you're doing a course at the Poetry School, which is, are there a few places? Okay, which is about using archives. And yeah, I should also thank Robert for hosting us, as usual. Thanks, Robert. And also, we're at swimmers.london. And if you're not on the mailing list, you just sign up. You'll get regular updates. You can sign up for the new pamphlet. And yeah, that's all. Thanks for coming, hang around, chat. See you soon.